I'm Abby Phillip in New York. Last week on this show, a guest shocked the table by arguing in part that slavery in America can't just be blamed on one race, and that museums put too much focus on the role of white people who participated in that terrible institution. And now tonight, that same argument is being pushed by the President of the United States. Donald Trump says that one of the reasons for his crackdown on Smithsonian museums is, quote, everything discussed is how bad slavery was. What we try to do on this program is create a platform for discussion and debate that reflects the very real differences that exist in this country. It's what echo chambers in our society fail to do, frankly. But on this topic, it's important to say objectively, slavery was indeed bad. It was evil, the nation's original sin. And it is impossible to understand the true history of this country without fully grappling with slavery's impact.
All right, guys, let's get right into it. Trump just tried to downplay slavery. Yeah, you heard that right, and CNN's Abby Phillip isn't having it. This is one of those moments where you just have to shake your head and ask, how is this even up for debate? Let's break it down.
Simply because of their birthplace and the color of their skin, the bodies and spirits of black men, women, and children were exploited for profit and power. They were forced onto ships, bound by shackles and collars that ripped off their skin. One older man described it as iron entering our souls. Some chose to jump into the waters infested with sharks rather than feel that iron. Now, once they arrived on this very soil, they were forced to work by way of the whip, despite being starved, sleep-deprived, threatened, tortured, physically and psychologically. They were auctioned off, humiliated, fearful, and separated from their families and their children. Black women and girls were raped and sexually assaulted. Many were brutally murdered and mutilated. Now, this endured for decades, centuries. And even in the places where slavery was not legal, institutions from our banks to universities were built on enslaved labor in both the North and in the South. And for many of the white Americans who did not personally own slaves, they benefited from a caste system that concentrated wealth and political power in their hands. So, when we acknowledge the existence of black people who operated George Washington's Mount Vernon or the black hands that built the White House, we are acknowledging the existence, the perseverance, and the contributions of the souls that white supremacy sought to erase. Those people built families, they developed a culture, they were the keepers of the faith, cultivators of community. And they are the ones who deserve credit for forcing America to rid itself of the stain of slavery. Now, all of this information, these stories are from the Smithsonian's African American History Museum. And I share this not as a lecture for you, but as a lesson. America, the superpower, is largely possible only because of the superpowers of people who went lifetimes without the same rights of generations who were boosted from their backs. True history should include everything. Yes, the evils and the horrors too. And museums are supposed to be places that protect those stories, the images, the lessons, the very things that inform so much of our current state of our republic, from racism to poverty. No matter how painful, or in the president's words, how horrible the lesson. Now, just listen to one formerly enslaved man describe what slavery is like in his own words.
You know what I'd rather do? If I thought that I'd ever be a slave again, I'd take a gun and just end it all right away. Because you're nothing but a dog. You're not a thing but a dog.
We are here in the studio with our panel, Leah Wright-Rigueur. I was actually surprised to see President Trump basically saying the quiet part out loud, that this review of the Smithsonian is not about even just something vague about reviewing history to make sure that it's fair. He wants to make it so that it talks less about slavery. What does that say to you?
Well, I think it's an effort. It's part of a larger effort to both sanewash and whitewash American history, and essentially erase all of the parts and disappear all of the parts that make Americans, that make President Trump uncomfortable, that feel distasteful, that are a reflection of the actual real and horrific parts of our history. And I find it a little ironic. You know, earlier today, as I was listening to some of the commentary, my first thought was, wait a second. I wonder if the president has actually ever visited any of the Smithsonian museums. And then I remembered that in 2017, he actually took a tour of the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Let me just play actually what he said during that tour. Listen to this.
I had the privilege of visiting the National Museum of African American History and Culture right here in Washington, D.C. It's a new, beautiful Smithsonian museum that serves as a shining example of African Americans' incredible contributions to our culture, our society, and our history. It also tells of the great struggle for freedom and equality that prevailed against the sins of slavery and the injustice of discrimination. The work and love of the people who helped create such a masterpiece is a testament to the legacy of so many leaders it honors.
This is one of those moments where history isn't just about the past, it's about who we are now. When we hear these accounts of slavery, it's not about guilt, it's about grace. Grace to acknowledge that real people endured unimaginable pain, and that pain shaped the foundation of this country in ways we're still untangling today. Abby Phillip isn't just recounting history, she's reminding us why it matters. Museums like the Smithsonian aren't there to make us comfortable. They're there to tell the full story, the beautiful, the brutal, and everything in between. And that's what makes this moment so revealing. When leaders try to soften or silence pieces of our past, it says more about their discomfort with truth than it does about history itself. We can't heal what we don't acknowledge. We can't grow if we only tell the easy parts of the story. True patriotism isn't hiding from our flaws, it's facing them, learning from them, and committing to do better. That's how we honor those who suffered. That's how we build a future that's honest, inclusive, and truly free.
So was it that he didn't believe what he read from the teleprompter as he recorded that video, or what?
You know, I'm really struggling to understand in a lot of ways, particularly given that the tour that he took with director Lonnie Bunch was actually a reflection of really the mastery that and really the care and the patience that historians, that scholars, that curators put into the Museum of African American History and Culture. It is not just about the horrors of slavery, although it tells that very important story. It actually follows this really brilliant model where you move through the museum and it tells the story not just of enslaved Americans in America, but also of the resilience, of the triumph. And in doing so, it tells a story that is very much about democracy and about a quest for democracy and the way that Americans both built this country, but also the story and the narrative of like a truly American experience. And so for the president, I think, to just simply erase that and push that away tells it, particularly after praising it a few years ago, tells us that this is part of a much larger agenda. This is part of a much larger agenda to erase things that really, I think the country is just refuses to deal with and is really uncomfortable with.
He said as much by ending this post with, "This country cannot be woke because woke is broke." He says, we have to have the hottest country in the world and we want people to talk about it, including our museums. Why is he equating talking about slavery with woke?
Well, look, I think, let me just start this conversation by saying that my personal view is slavery was a reprehensible institution. I agree with your words that it was our original sin. We also fought a war to eradicate it and to get over it as a country. And that was a necessary thing that happened, and a lot of people died, and we did eradicate it, and that's a good thing. I think what he's asking is, in our museums, what defines us? Are we going to be defined by the worst moment or the worst institution or the worst mistake we ever made? Or are we going to be defined by what we've done moving forward to get over it and to become the greatest nation on the earth? My belief is that he wants to look at these museums, not because he wants to do away with the idea that slavery occurred, but that he wants to ask a very simple question. Are we going to present ourselves as being exceptional or not? And I think he believes there is an effort by some to continue to try to define us from our worst moment instead of to try to focus and define us based on our best moments, which started when we eradicated slavery and began to move forward as the light of the world. And
but
so
isn't
that's
that
what I
make
think.
Museums, that's what makes us an exceptional nation, is because they tell the history and the story of our country, and therefore, you know, these horrible, horrific moments in our history. The original sin, as Abby talked about, when it comes to slavery, has, you know, we of course did eradicate it, but look where we've come today. And I think those museums, like to your point, make America exceptional. And in museums all around the world that document atrocities, whether it be, you know, from Nazi Germany to eradicating slavery here in the United States, you have to learn the lessons of the past. And to deny it is to defend it.
I don't think he's denying it. And Bachi may want to comment on this as well. But I think what he wants to ask is a simple question. As we present our history, are we spending most of our time focused on something terrible? Are we going to spend more time as we enter our 250th anniversary focused on what this country has done to improve the lives of every single person who lives here? We are the light of the world for a reason, because we're an improving commodity.
The question I ask when I hear you say that is, why, I mean, the idea that slavery happened, it's hard to understand what we've overcome if you don't even talk about what it was. You know, I think that kind of waters down the whole.
I don't think anybody is proposing that we ignore that it happened. I don't think that's accurate.
It's really telling when someone praises something one day and dismisses it the next. When President Trump visited the African American History Museum back in 2017, he spoke about it with respect, acknowledging both the contributions and the struggles displayed there. But now he's framing that same history as something that shouldn't be centered or shouldn't be taught with honesty. This isn't about erasing pride in how far we've come. It's about being honest about where we started. A museum's job isn't to make us comfortable, it's to make us think. To help us understand the full story. The pain, the resilience, the injustice, and the progress. When we skip the hard parts, we don't make our country look stronger, we make our memory weaker. Truth isn't woke, it's necessary. You can't celebrate how far you've come if you don't remember where you began.
I think that the problem is that there are people, and Scott used the term a couple of times, and I don't think it was meant with any type of ill intent, but he said, you know, we got over it. And I think that's the problem. I think that there are a lot of people in this country who believe that for some reason we got over it. I mean, the fact is that American chattel slavery is vastly different than what Jillian Michaels and others talk about when they talk about slavery around the world. I mean, the chattel slavery system that we had was extremely transactional. It was actually codified in law, and it was based upon the color and race, as you so eloquently pointed out in your opening. And so not only when you think about that portion of where we are, 26 of our first 30 Supreme Court justices owned slaves. The people who are on our money every single day owned slaves. United States presidents, members of the United States Congress owned slaves. Lehman Brothers, we're not far from Wall Street, owned slaves. Brooks Brothers suits that we wear owned slaves. So not only are we talking about the epicenter and the foundation of where our country was built, we have to acknowledge that. But even more importantly, and this is where I believe that Scott and I can find agreement on this issue. Breon and Megan Walker are two of my best friends in the world. Their dad was the first African-American SGA president at the University of South Carolina, right? He was an exec at IBM, but he was one of the first, right? We're still talking about first that emerged and stood on those shoulders. I tell the story often about my mom and dad. My mom helped desegregate high schools. In Hamilton High School in Memphis, Tennessee, my dad shot in the Orangeburg Massacre. This is a part of my story. This isn't some faint, distant history. Yeah. And so the reason I bring that up is because I think that American exceptionalism talks about the fact that Black folk help, enslaved folk help build this country for what it is. Mm-hmm. They built Washington, D.C., but all of us are around this table. Abby, myself, all of us, not just Abby and myself, all of us are around this table because of the sacrifices and the blood and the sweat and the tears these people poured in.
This right here is the heart of the issue. It's not about living in the past, it's about understanding how the past still lives in us. Slavery wasn't just a chapter we closed. It was a system that shaped laws, economies, and lives in ways that still echo today. from the buildings we work in to the institutions we trust, that history is part of America's foundation. And that's why honesty matters, not to shame, but to shine a light on the strength and resilience of those who endured, resisted, and built much of this nation with their hands, often without ever tasting the freedom they helped create. Acknowledging that isn't divisive, it's necessary. It helps us understand not only how far we've come, but how far we still have to go to truly become a nation where everyone's story is valued and everyone's dignity is honored. Thanks for watching. If this conversation resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more thoughtful discussions and breakdowns. Turn on notifications so you never miss an upload.